Welcome to Unpopular Opinions with ChunkyBeef, where I take your sacred cow, cook it medium rare, and serve it with ketchup. Pretty much anything goes here. Movies, video games, television shows, you name it. Today we've got a particularly spicy episode, which is sure to ruffle some feathers. Let's get started. So, Matt Groening recently released the first season to his new show on Netflix. You might have heard of it. It's called Disenchantment. It's been receiving some pretty high praise, and so I decided since it's Matt Groening, the guy who gave us Simpsons and Futurama, I should give it a fair shake. The first season only has 10 episodes, but they're around 25 minutes long, so it makes for a good 4 hours or so of entertainment. Initially, I'd only intended to sample a few episodes, but I figured if I wanted to talk about it, it would only be fair to watch all 10 episodes. For those 1 or 2 people who are only here to hear my opinion on it, I'll save you the time and state simply that Disenchantment is a middle-of-the-road cartoon, and I can't really recommend watching it unless you're really bored and need something to fill the gap until something better comes along. Okay, I get that you're angry, but hear me out. Before we get to the explanation, though, let's summarize the series a bit for those in the audience that might not have watched it. Disenchantment is a cartoon that follows Princess Tia Beanie, and she struggles with her life as royalty, and often the issues that creates. Such as her constant desire to have free will, but then being forced to live within the confines of the box created for her by her father, King Zog, and the expectations of everyone else in her kingdom. From episode 1, she's joined by Elfo, an elf as you can imagine, and Lucy, a diminutive demon who often gets mistaken for a cat. As with all things, I feel that the bad can be best contrast if it's prefaced with the good. For starters, the voice cast for Disenchantment is extremely talented, with notable standouts being Eric Andre, Billy West, and John DiMaggio. There's numerous other voice actors who you might recognize just by listening if you watched a lot of The Simpsons or Futurama. The artwork is also well done, if simplistic, but that can probably be chalked up to Matt Groening's continued fascination with the Simpsons style of just about everything. In fact, you can basically just consider Disenchantment to be medieval Simpsons or Futurama. Disenchantment also plays well with various medieval tropes, and it does a lot of nodding and winking at other popular mediums like Monty Python and Game of Thrones. If you're into either of those things, you'll have an easy time picking up what Disenchantment is putting down, figuratively speaking. Unfortunately, while Disenchantment has a wonderfully talented voice crew and plays well with medieval tropes, movies, and television, its fatal flaw is probably just that the show isn't very funny. In fact, I went into Disenchantment expecting to laugh my ass off. Considering how great the early seasons of The Simpsons were, and how great the near entirety of Futurama was, walking into Disenchantment was like if Robin Williams came back to life, advertised a comedy show, but only Gilbert Gottfried winds up on stage with a mediocre act. Yeah, he can be funny from time to time, but I was expecting Robin Williams, or at the very least a close facsimile to him and his work. And that's basically what Disenchantment is, a Matt Groening bait and switch. I only chuckled every now and then, but typically when I chuckled or actually laughed, it's because of the voice actors doing their jobs well. Most of the jokes land, but all too often they land flat. I only laughed or chuckled an average of 2 or 3 times an episode. That's maybe once every 8 minutes. I feel like I should have been more amused by a show from Matt Groening, especially a brand spanking new one that had tons of fresh things to play off of, but here we are. I think a lot of that is because the first 5 or 6 episodes deal almost strictly with Bean, the main protagonist, dealing with the fact that she's a rebellious good-for-nothing. The later episodes improve on this by making Bean less of the focus and learning to spread the love, but it's tough to tell if that's a good thing or not. Because if I may be honest, I find Elfo to be super annoying, but I think that's intentional. Almost like he was added to the show to give contrast, so I'd be more inclined to enjoy the show more when he wasn't present or talking. At least Lucy, again voiced by Eric Andre, is entertaining and amusing, but even then he's basically just Demon Bender. Which brings me to my next issue with Disenchantment. It tries to be The Simpsons, and it tries to be Futurama, and as a result, the show's writers don't let it carve out its own niche. One moment it's silly and random, and then the next it tries to land a joke relevant to the time period or setting. Essentially, it's nudging you in the side saying, hey, you know Game of Thrones, right? See how this chair looks like the Game of Thrones throne? Funny, huh? And it gets pretty tiresome fast. I see every episode flop back and forth between formats, and I think that's a lot of the reason why I had a hard time enjoying the show. My expectations were constantly changing, and so because the show's creators were too afraid to let Disenchantment be free and create its own flavor, they opted instead to chain it down and play dress up. They just forgot to buy new clothes for this series, so sometimes it looks like medieval Homer Simpson, and other times medieval Professor Farnsworth. I want to like Disenchantment, I really do. Bean is a likable protagonist, Lucy is a fun character chained to a bad show, and the setting has a ton of potential. But the show just squanders this potential completely. It's why whenever I see other glowing reviews of Disenchantment, I have to scratch my head wondering if we watched the same show. Perhaps I'm just a bitter old man with no sense of humor anymore. Or perhaps I've simply been spoiled by other, better, adult-centric animated shows like BoJack Horseman, which is also on Netflix, which also released its recent season. If you want a good idea of what a funny animated show meant for adults is, watch a few episodes of BoJack and you'll get a firmer grasp of why I feel Disenchantment fails to live up to its potential. Who knows, maybe future seasons of Disenchantment will hit the mark, that the show's creators needed a warm-up. It's not like the show is supremely awful, but when your first season's average is basically a slight shrug and it was okay, that's a really bad first impression. Hopefully they'll go back to the drawing board and focus a little more on jokes and a little less on Elfo. And there you have it, your sacred cow sacrificed for the greater good. Do you agree with my analysis of Disenchantment? Do you disagree with my opinion? Feel free to leave a comment below. See you next time.